Doctors of Reddit, what happened when you diagnosed a COVID-19 denier with COVID-19? Didn't diagnose, but I'm sure you'll appreciate the mental gymnastics. I worked obs-gyne a few months back. For obstetrics we had an amber ward, confirmed non-COVID ward, and a red ward, confirmed COVID no test done. We'd require mum and partner to both get COVID tests done in our clinic the day before the planned admission so we knew which ward to place them in. One patient refused to have the swab taken because she thought COVID was a hoax. So we were told her she'd have to stay in the red ward during her admission as we couldn't confirm she didn't have COVID if she didn't have a test. She went absolutely mental saying you can't do that. What if I get COVID? Doc chiming in. They told me I was wrong. Obviously, Therese no way they had COVID despite coming into the for shortness of breath, cough, and fevers. When I mentioned that their wife who was several rooms down also had COVID, their response was, oh, that makes sense because she always gets sick. When I asked how it made sense that they wouldn't have COVID with the same symptoms, I was told that it was because they were overall healthy and only took their mask off to eat and drink in the casino. I had a lady who was maxed out on high flow, next step is breathing tube, who still refused she had COVID and was holding a negative test in her hand that she had taken a week prior. The COVID equivalent of the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. 'Tis but a flu. You dumb bastard, you've got no oxygen left. Yes, I have. Looks at vitals just hyperventilating. I work on a COVID unit and I ran into a patient like this. They tell me over and over again about how they weren't really sick and about how I didn't need to be gowned up and they even tried to take my face shield off. If you test positive for COVID 2 times then you have COVID. People are crazy. They even tried to take my face shield off. That is beyond crazy emo. Be nuts all to yourself, don't ducking touch others you psycho. I wonder if this is a defense mechanism. He's trying so hard to deny it to himself he needs others to buy into it for his own reassurance. It's crazy that people do things like this. Those zombie movie scenes when people are in denial even when all hell break loose makes more sense now. Know that asshat who gets bit, doesn't tell anyone, and puts the whole group in danger? Turns out that character is half the country. The good news is, I now know who those people are and my zombie circle is a bit smaller than it was. Good riddance. I'm an anesthesiologist, and in our institution, we're the ones tasked with intubating COVID suspects positive patients who would otherwise die without ventilatory support. And holy hell, there are a lot of patients who don't believe COVID is real. Most of them believe that it's just an elaborate lie that doctors use to label random patients to mooch money off them. Some of them scream at us, in whatever capacity their diseased lungs can allow them to, some outright refuse intubation, in which case they die several hours later from respiratory failure. It's emotionally taxing having to face that every shift. When was the stage of the Black Death where people said no, this isn't happening to anyone, this is a trick of the devil to make us think God has abandoned us, no one is actually sick at all? Are we just worse at scientific reasoning than 13th century peasants? TBF, it's harder to deny when 70% of your town is rotting in the street. Which is why compliance rates, for example, in Germany skyrocketed once the photos of military trucks transporting the dead from Bergamo in Italy came in. For many deniers, shit then got real. Edit, thanks for the awards, but for future ones. Please save the money and donate to your local food bank, refugee assistance or other charity. Lots of people have been hit ducking hard by the pandemic and the failures of our respective governments. Wish we had that reaction. We had refrigerated tractor trailers full of bodies in NYC early on and the deniers didn't give a shit. Still had to treat her despite her accusing me of hiding the real diagnosis from her and doing something to make her sicker. Love my job. I can't fathom that people really believe that in a pandemic their likelihood of having COVID is so low that they accuse people of hiding a diagnosis. Makes no sense to me. To them there is no pandemic and COVID is a hoax and the doctors are trying to silence them. What do they really think is going on? Just out of nowhere, the entire world's supply of scientists and doctors got together to fake a virus so that they could do what, exactly? I've tried talking to COVID hoaxers and they just talk in circles. RN here with most of 2020 spent in COVID land. I never had anyone refuse treatment when things got serious. I know some of the MDs I worked with got yelled at, like the rest of us, but honestly that happens frequently anyway. Some denier patients lived, many of which had accepted reality by the end of their stay after seeing what we all were going through to treat them. Some died telling me I was a sheep or an idiot or a liar between gasps of air. COVID didn't care. My worst experience was when a 2-year-old kid got diagnosed with COVID. His mother had brought him with fever and diarrhea. The child was severely dehydrated, and so we had to do a mandatory swab test since we planned to admit him. It came positive and the mother refused to admit it. We were ready to perform a repeat test, and we even advised for the parents to get tested. Her defense was the child never left the house. It's just I and the father who go to work daily. The grandmother babysits while we are away. How can he even get COVID without leaving the house? She had called her husband, he came with 10 to 15 relatives in a car, they broke a few chairs and then left with the baby. We just informed about the case to the COVID control center. A family full of clowns? That's the only explanation I can come up with. Fun fact, clowns actually have a code of ethics, apparently. It's called the 8 Commandments. I'm a student, funeral director, and I see families go to the funeral of someone who died of COVID-19 and still deny it. They started out shrieking at the doctors to change the cause of death on the death certificate. Now FEMA is helping with funeral expenses for COVID deaths. Suddenly there's changes of heart. Physician here. The willful cognitive dissonance is real. It never ceases to amaze me how many patients will refuse assistance from me to register to get vaccinated, make claims that vaccines are harmful, but then accept my medical care on anything else that suits their whim. Patients absolutely have autonomy to refuse care, but why would you continue to see a physician and accept their medical advice and care if you think they would simultaneously recommend something to you that would be harmful? I've posed this question to patients who are vaccine hesitant. Why would you let me manage your diabetes and hypertension if you think I would harm you by recommending vaccinations? You cannot get any kind of thoughtful response aside from, I just don't want to be vaccinated. As an anesthesiologist, by the time someone's calling for us, it's for intubation and the patient is in no condition to deny anything. Honestly, it's usually the family that's the issue and that needs to be escorted from the room. That boggles my mind. By that point they can see that their loved one is having trouble breathing, and they're still trying to keep them from being treated. Denial can be unbelievably powerful. If their worldview requires believing that COVID is a hoax, then some would rather die than admit their view of reality is a lie. Infectious disease doctor here. Seen about 450 to 500 COVID patients in the hospital since it all started. Only one patient ever accused me of using the nasal swab to give him COVID, along with a microchip. A handful have, ranted nonstop about China. Everyone else has been sick enough to accept it, but lots still refuse the idea of vaccination even after being in the ICU. Off topic, but I got my second shot the other day. I felt slightly ill the following day. Was that just the batteries activating the microchips? Can I expect my 5 grams to improve, or will it still be horrible since it's at E letter? I got the T-Mobile chip and my arm is turning pink already. Magenta. Same, plus free pizza on Tuesdays. No shit, the price of mobile here in Canada is through the ducking roof. It's among the most expensive in the world, yet people don't want to get free 5 grams, fucking dummies. My wife's a nurse, just had to deal with a patient who refused to get tested prior to her surgery, so they had to treat her like a COVID patient and needed to charge her for all the added ply, gowns, goggles, etc. The kicker is, recovery wouldn't take her for observation while she was woken up, so the anesthesiologist needed to stay and monitor her in the room for nearly 3 hours. They are billed at $40,015 minutes, and there is no way her insurance is going to cover the extra costs because she signed a document saying she denied a COVID test. $4,800 extra for the anesthesiologist. My mom works for an OB-GYN who specializes in high-risk pregnancies and births, and he was called into the hospital to check out a woman whose due date was about 2 weeks away and who was very sick. He confirmed she had COVID and admitted her to the hospital until she gave birth, but she insisted it was a hoax and ended up checking herself out, but not before she spat in the face of the nurse, who coincidentally had just completed chemo. That was near the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm so curious what happened to that lady. The nurse is okay, thank goodness. That is at least assault, but possibly so much more depending on the outcome. For sure. I asked my mom about it recently, and she said the nurse is fine and that she has no info on what happened to the patient.